Well, welcome to the Multiracial Ministry Mindset Podcast.
Yeah, that's a mouthful, actually, isn't it?
Man, when you add podcasts.
That's right. When you add podcasts, yeah, yeah. The 3M.
Yeah.
The 3M. Yeah. Multiracial Ministry Mindset Podcast. I mean, we're so grateful to have you joining us on this journey. If you have been enjoying the podcast so far, you can go find more at multiracialministry.com. That's multiracialministry.com. You can find more stuff there. We'd love to engage with you there as well and on social media. We're so glad to be able to be having these conversations with you. We were just talking about how much fun we're actually having just talking to each other about this.
Yes.
And it's cool that you guys get to engage with us as well, and we can learn from each other.
Yep.
So what are we talking about today in our first season on overthrowing fear?
We are talking about creating equitable systems and structures.
That's right. Creating equitable systems and structures is a core cultural practice of a multiracial ministry bent on overthrowing fear.
Yep.
One of the ways that we talk about this in our church is we create systems and structures to hold each other accountable and to distribute power equitably so that no one is afraid of the people in power.
Right.
And we regularly talk about and preach about issues of equity, privilege, and power that can create contexts of fear for people on the margins, even of our ministry.
Yes. So the burning question that everybody out there is wondering, why is this important in a multiracial church? Why is this important in a multiracial ministry?
Gosh, it is so important. I almost want to make a joke about, like, if you don't know why it's important in a multiracial ministry,
you should be in it.
You should listen to this podcast. You should listen to this podcast because creating equitable systems and structures is directly addressing the stuff that we talked about in episode 0 on why it's even called a multiracial ministry to begin with, because race itself is inherently talking about power, which is why it's such a hard thing to talk about.
Yep.
It's inherently talking about power. Race itself is a system of inequity that structures various aspects of society, sometimes explicitly, like in the Jim Crow era, sometimes implicitly, through various non-explicit but coded policies around ways that we hire, ways that our neighborhoods are policed, different types of things. Whether we are aware of it or not, whenever race is a factor, power is at stake and systems and structures are at stake.
Well, I tend to go off script.
Okay, do it.
I'm going off script here. Why is it that white people shy away? Yeah, I started to say that.
Started with why is it that white people? It's always a great start to a question. I love it.
Why is it that more white people don't engage or are afraid to engage in the conversation of race?
I mean, there are so many reasons that I would think. I mean, it probably depends to some degree on the person, but there are some common threads that I can speak to from my own point of view.
Right.
When you start to talk about systems and structures, it does sort of take us away from talking about inner intentions to some degree, which is where a lot of white folks like myself find some safety in the conversation about race. Because you can't see my intentions, but you can see our systems.
Yeah.
You can't see my intentions, so I may have said something you didn't like, but you don't know that was actually coming from a really loving place. That's a place to retreat to. That's a place where I can go and feel safe in this conversation about race and feel like I'm a good person. But if you start to talk about systems and structures, those are external realities that everybody can see and talk about. Well, I mean, theoretically, everybody can see them.
Right.
And I think beyond that, oftentimes these systems and structures, whether we're totally aware of it or not, as white folks, are set up for us to succeed.
Right. And I heard a lot of my white friends will say, or they'll say something like, "Well, that's not a gospel issue." And I would think creating equitable systems and structure is at the core of the gospel. But they say it's not a gospel issue. Do you know why? Like,
well, wait, say more about why you would say it's at the core of the gospel.
Because like Jesus came and he was establishing a fair and equitable system for everybody. And like where there's no big I's and little U's. We're all somebody to Jesus. That's why he died for us. We're all somebody. So
all have sinned.
Man,
he died for
not y'all have sinned.
Yeah, not y'all.
Not y'all. All.
I like that.
And so Jesus created this equitable system.
Yeah. And I think too, maybe one of the reasons why, I'm just spitballing here, but I think one of the reasons why sometimes people think that equitable systems and structures are not a gospel issue is because we have such a small view of what the gospel is. Because we have taken, I'm going to get really nerdy and theological here.
Yeah.
We've taken one aspect of the gospel, and theologians talk about the various aspects of the gospel sometimes as the ordo salutis, the order of salvation, the various things that happen in the process of salvation.
Yep.
And we've taken one of those things that we call justification, this thing whereby Jesus justifies us in God's sight, right? Our sin is given to him, his righteousness is given to us,
right?
And God sees us as righteous. That's justification. We've taken that one part of the ordo salutis, and we've made it the gospel.
Yeah.
Whereas the gospel is what Jesus said. Jesus said the kingdom of God is near.
Yep.
That's what Mark chapter 1 says was Jesus preaching the gospel.
Yeah.
The kingdom of God is near. And that encompasses all of that stuff. And it encompasses glorification at the end of the ordo salutis, at the end of history, when Jesus comes back to set the world to rights. And do you think that when he comes back to set the world to rights, when he creates the new heavens and the new earth,
right,
that there are going to be inequitable systems and structures in that world?
Man, listen.
No. So it's part and parcel. I'm right there with you. I think it's part and parcel of the gospel.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why we extract justice from the gospel is that we have extracted an aspect of the gospel from the whole gospel.
Yeah.
Right. And we said that this one thing is the sum total. It's a very important part of the gospel. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's not the whole thing. So this is not just part of what I'm hearing you say when you're saying this is a gospel issue. This is not just a tactical issue.
No. This
is not just to make some people feel comfortable. This is core to what we believe.
To what we believe.
Yeah.
To what we believe.
Yeah. So let's get like super practical here for a minute. Why is this particularly, how does this show up specifically in a multiracial ministry context? When we're talking about creating equitable systems and structures, how could this show up in a typical ministry, a typical church, on a Wednesday?
on a Wednesday. Well, the best example I can give, if you don't mind me talking about it now, is the best example I could give to that, and is where we were starting this church. Well, we were starting Tapestry Church. You had your church plant,
which was mostly white folks, new to Oakland.
Yep. And I had my church plant, the Way Church.
Yep.
Which was Black and Oaklanders.
Yep.
And
we were merging those two churches together.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, and this is the best example I can give. I preach my best sermon to you on shared leadership, because I always thought we would do a shared leadership model. I preach my best sermon to you on shared leadership, and you just like, nah, it doesn't work for me. And then I'm just like, okay. So I preached my second best sermon to you that I had on shared leadership. And then you said, bro, man, this doesn't work for me. And I'm just like, man, this dude is making me pull out all the stops here. I preached my third best sermon to you that I had on shared leadership. And you just said, listen, this doesn't work for me if you're not the lead pastor. And I'm just like, well, say more about that. And your response was, because what people need to see, what Oakland needs to see, what the world needs to see is a white man submitting to the authority of a black man. And kudos to you, because I never heard a white man talk like that. but it was you creating that fair and equitable system, realizing that the power dynamics of race would always be at play with a black man and a white man leading. Yeah. And you wanted to create a fair and equitable system.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, so for those of you who are like, wow, he gave up so much, I didn't actually, in some ways. Number one, because I trust you totally. So it was not hard to trust you with our church. But also, the reason that it made so much sense to me to do that, the reason why it seemed equitable and not inequitable, was because I'm very aware of the fact that the vast majority of multiracial churches are pastored by white men.
Yep.
And the natural expectation in multiracial spaces by just about everybody, whether they're aware of it or not, is that we are going to assimilate to white culture here. They're just going to be people of various colors here.
Yep.
And when that is the dynamic at work, and when the denominations or networks that we're a part of use various sort of white cultural ways and are dominated by mostly white folks in the denomination or the network, all of that is going to skew power in my favor. And if we are in our system on a level, technically, me being white means that all of those other things actually put me above you, which is an injustice any way you frame it.
Right.
But also specifically for the reason that I'd also at that point been in ministry for 5 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you'd been in ministry for 28 or something like that at that point.
Yeah, come on, I'm not that old.
It's hard for me to count when the numbers get that high. I'm not that good at math. That's why I became a pastor. But you know what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense from any other perspective than I was gonna say something that may be a little bit sensitive. It doesn't make sense from any perspective other than one with a white racial lens on it, that I should be a co-pastor with you at that stage.
Right.
It doesn't. So to me, it didn't even seem like I was giving up so much. I was just doing what made sense, and also what the gospel demands.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you, when you said that, how it made me feel. For one, I'm just like, whoa, this dude is trusting me with his church. And not only is he trusting me with his church, but he's trusting me with his family. Because you and your wife were a part of that church. You're trusting those two things to my leadership. And it was humbling to me. It was humbling for me for you to entrust all that care to me for your church and for your family. So that made me like, man, okay, I don't ever want to misuse this trust. And I want to give it 110% every time I'm able to give it 110%. And when I'm not able to give it 110%, I'm going to give it 100.
Yeah.
And that was huge. Like I said, I never experienced somebody white talking like that, number one. But it was very humbling for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think that the only reason I could do that is because Well, for one, the example of Jesus, like emptying himself, and that's what I did is nothing by comparison.
Yeah.
But it's a simple way of actually just living out my faith. But also the reason I could do that is because you're such a trustworthy person, and you're not the type of person to lord it over people, as you know, to use that biblical phrase. You know, you're not the type of leader to use your power in unjust ways. You're very generous with your power and very open to letting other people serve and even lead in their gifts. So I never even was worried that I was going to lose anything in that equation, because you just make it so easy to serve under you.
Thank you. But you know what I love?
What's that?
I love when we're out somewhere and somebody, we tell them that we're pastors at the same church. And then somebody leans over to you and they're like, hey, I wanted to talk to you about so-and-so and so-and-so. And then you say, oh, that's fine, but you got to ask my lead pastor. I love that.
I'll bet you do. And you know what I love? I love when somebody comes up to me with some idea that I'm like, ooh, wow, that's an idea. And I'm like, you're going to have to talk to the lead pastor about that one, because I'm just executive. You know, I don't make the big calls. That's a big call. So it works for both of us. Let's talk about other ways that this can show up in the nitty gritty of church life, right? So one of the things that's happening recently is we actually put out a job opportunity at our church, right? We put it out on Indeed, you know, and we're looking for somebody. We're looking to hire somebody, and we ran the job description by a bunch of people in our organization, but we also reached out to a friend who's in HR and who does like DE&I work. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion, for those of you who aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, I wasn't, but yeah.
So we ran it by her as well, just say, hey, can you check over this stuff? And actually looking more for like, make sure that we're not like, you know, putting something out there that would violate any laws or something.
Right.
But she came back to us with some criticisms, constructive criticism about how our language could affect a potential applicants. You want to share a little bit about what that was?
Well, we had used a word, and she's like, you know, this word probably would discourage someone, and then
and then what was that word? It was chemistry, right? Like we're looking for somebody who has a good chemistry.
And a word that I thought was harmless, and a word that I would frequently use when talking about work culture.
But she clued us into the fact that it's not a word that's often used with D&I informed hiring practices, because words like chemistry, words like culture fit, those are words that come across to potential applicants as code for implicit bias will be a factor in this hiring process. That people are going to look at my culture, at my background, and they're going to go, not a good culture, for all things being equal.
Right. And I never thought of it, but it seemed so obvious when she pointed it out. And it was just like, oh, man, I see why.
Absolutely.
I see why. But like, I never would have thought that a word like chemistry could
be like coded language.
Coded language.
I mean, and I didn't either. And that's part of the reason why, you know, just casting the net far and wide to the people with different types of wisdom in our circles is really helpful. Like we could not have seen that ourselves. We wouldn't have seen it ourselves.
Oh, I didn't see it.
No, we're pastors. We're pastors. We're not HR reps. You know, like we don't know.
No, we couldn't have seen it. I didn't see it.
Right, exactly.
That's why I was in there and she pointed it out.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, those types of things are really important to pick up to create equitable systems and structures, because one of the things that you need to do in a multiracial church setting or multiracial ministry setting is you need to hire people from various backgrounds. Right? Like there needs to, one equitable system is your hiring system. So that you can have equitable representation in the staff and leadership of your church in various aspects. Right? So that's one thing to be thoughtful about. Another thing to be thoughtful about is who you ask to volunteer for what? Who do you ask to volunteer for what?
Don't just pick a volunteer because they're there?
Well, right. Yeah. It's hard because sometimes you just say, like, you see somebody, you think, oh, I'm just going to ask him. But just take a little bit more time to be a little bit more thoughtful about how does asking this person within the context of our whole system already, how does that inform how our ministry takes shape, and who sees themselves as potential leaders in this way or potential volunteers of this type?
Well, connect groups.
Yeah. Okay. Connect groups. Our words for small group or community group or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And connect groups, we have a system where we do not pick two people of the same race, the same color, the same identity to lead a connect group. There has to be two different people.
Right.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, we really want to be a church that is not just aesthetically diverse, but is racially united.
Yep.
Right. And part of that means that we don't just show up to church on a Sunday and sit next to somebody who has a different racial background than we do, is that we actually get into each other's lives.
Yeah.
Right. We actually know each other. And we're going to talk about this later, but you know, this idea of like being lifelong learners of the other, that is a critical part of a racially united church, right? And a witness to what racial unity can look like in this world because of Jesus.
Yep.
If that's true, then we have to be getting together in our homes. We have to be getting together midweek. We have to be talking to each other about real life. So how do you get folks to get together with people who are different from them?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they have to see that there is representation that is diverse, facilitating the group or leading the group in some way, shape, or form, right? So they know that they're going to be safe in that group.
Right.
Right. So we made a commitment really early on that we would never start a connect group that didn't have a racially diverse ministry or leadership team.
Yep.
Which has not always been an easy thing to do.
Right. Yeah.
Let's be honest.
It's way harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
But that's part of creating those structures.
Yep.
And so.
Yeah, and it's been, I mean, by and large, like really helpful, I think.
Oh, definitely.
It's not always been successful.
Right.
In the sense of more groups, more people.
Right.
Right. Because if it was just like we could just put groups together however we wanted, however it seemed like organic and natural to us, we probably have more groups with more people in them.
Yeah.
But they'd be like a white group over here, a black group over here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we might have more of them, but they wouldn't be serving the purpose of being an embodiment of the gospel in the neighborhood.
Yep.
So those are equitable systems and structures. Those are examples of equitable systems and structures that we can get into. And you know, we're not actually just like doing this because DE&I is a big thing in the 21st century, right? We're doing this because in the first century, the early church said this was a big deal. Like, did create equitable systems and structures in diverse churches, in ethnically diverse churches. So tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Yeah. So you remember in Acts, the 6th chapter, where the Hellenistic Jews were getting overlooked. Yeah. And
the widows of the Hellenistic Jews were getting overlooked in the food distribution, right?
And they brought it to Peter, and Peter's just like, hey, you know, we don't have time to deal with this. Let's create a equitable system and structure to have someone deal with this.
Yeah. And in case you're like, those are not exactly the words that Peter used. They weren't, but any reader of the New Testament in that day in Greek, and any member of the church would have noticed that every name of every leader that the apostles put in power to govern that system were Hellenistic names, Greek names, right? So in other words, the apostles did not say, well, look, it probably just like wasn't their intention to overlook the widows. Why do you have to like go like make it like a heart issue? You know, it's not a heart issue. They really care about you too. It's just, you know, and they didn't say, hey, it's just a couple of bad apples in the bread line. There's just a couple bad apples. There's just some guys who like really don't like the Hellenistic Jews. We just get them out of the breadline. It'll be fine. Like they didn't say that.
Or nor did they. Well, we'll just replace those volunteers and the problem will go away.
Exactly. Exactly. Now what they did was they created a system of accountability and responsibility where they designated the same people who were on the underside of the power dynamic.
There you go. That's important.
To lead the dynamic, to rectify the issue. It wasn't a matter of, how can we get the people who are in cultural power to be more generous?
Right.
It was, how can we get the folks who are typically on the underside of this power dynamic to help us rectify this and make this equitable? So that is the model that we are given by the apostles in Scripture. And it just stands to reason that we should be extrapolating that for our time and place, right? In the ways that we hire, in the ways that we, bring in volunteers, in the hierarchical structures of in our org charts, making sure that our pay scales are equitable.
Whoa!
I know. Now we're really, people are like, back up. But that is not just a 21st century sort of Western value.
Right.
It's a value that's deeply biblical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm the resource guy. Right.
What do you have for us today?
What am I? A resident recommender? That's what we decided. So today I have for us a book by Dr. Corey Edwards at The Ohio State University. Called The Elusive Dream. The Power of Race in Interracial Churches. It is a book based on a whole lot of research. Dr. Corey Edwards is a sociologist. And she talks about lots of ways in which interracial churches aren't necessarily always fulfilling the promise of interracial churches. And she talks about various systems and structures, including like worship, and not just music, but also like the cultural ways of worship and how we address when people worship differently. It's very impactful.
And the Elusive Dream has a podcast.
They do. We just discovered it.
They have a podcast.
And maybe many of you already listened to it way ahead of us on this journey. But it's a really great resource for anybody who is practicing or doing multiracial ministry. And it is a way that you could dive deeper into the practices of multiracial ministry in a systems-based way, in a structured way, and see where the church often falls short in those ways, because we're just kind of leading with our best intentions and not paying attention to the systems and structures that form us and shape us together.
Well, that wraps it up for us. Listen, if you are enjoying this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe.
You can find it anywhere you get your podcasts. It's going to be distributed all over the place. So if you're listening to it on Apple and you're like, I prefer Spotify, you could go there and find it. It'll be there. And also, if you're listening to us and you're not watching us, you can also watch the podcast on YouTube, and you can see Bernard's big, beautiful beard as we talk together. And his
oil running down the beard of Aaron.
That's right. There's no oil involved. That's not a thing that we've done so far on the podcast, but maybe we'll get there. So thank you so much for joining us on this journey. We're looking forward to seeing you for episode 4 of our first season, where we're going to be talking about being willing to fail. Being willing to fail. So we'll see you next time on the Multiracial Ministry Podcast. Oh, and go to multiracialministry.com if you want to find out more. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.